I just want to do a couple of quick announcements. I'll introduce myself. My name's Ace. Myself and Ephraim are the ones who kind of put this group together. And with you guys all coming out, we plan to grow this community and have some fun. We talk about cybersecurity stuff. Some of us are either in the cybersecurity industry currently, or we're aspiring to be in the cybersecurity community. And the plan for this community is to bring people out, get them to learn stuff, get them interested, get them talking about stuff. And then if jobs appear for the folks that are working in the industry, we can bring people in and have them, kind of do the networking thing. After we have these meetups, we typically like to go out and have a bite or something. We can do a little bit of sort of friendly, not like strict getting talked to and having the talks, networking. Totally optional. You're welcome to come. Everybody's invited. We also have a Discord, which if you're interested in joining, Ephraim can get you into that. Another benefit of the meetings is that we check people in through Eventbrite, which you can then use to complete your CPEs, if you need CPEs or certifications that you have to do your education credits. I'm trying to think if there's one sort of mention is it seems like ECPI hosting us we had a pretty awesome run. We came here a couple times. Not saying that we're not going to be able to host meetings here anymore, but they're trying to move us to Fridays. So in the interim, I think we're going to try to find another location to have our meetings, because we don't want to move it from Saturday to Friday quite yet, because we just got this thing going. So we want to keep it kind of on the Saturday schedules. If we do it every other Saturday is when we meet up. So we're currently looking for places to meet up. Last time we had the meetup at Liam Fitzpatrick's, which is a Irish bar that's up the street somewhere from here, not too far away. But I suspect we'll kind of look for our options. Sorry, I don't want to be talking. Have you behind me? You can be behind me. I just don't want to not be talking. So we'll try to look for a place that's relatively close in the area. The meetup is Hack Central Florida. So ideally we would have a couple different spots that we could meet up to, and then have people come from sort of all over for that situation. But
if they're on the Discord, that's where we're going to communicate. Yeah,
the Discord is probably where we will communicate where we're going to meet up. We'll also put it on the Eventbrite as well, obviously, or maybe not obviously, and that's why I'm mentioning it. So some of the things the things that have worked for me in the past is using public places like a library has been pretty useful for me in the past when I've been doing stuff. So anyways, we'll talk about where we're going to meet up and going forward what the plan is. So this week, like I said, we're going to be talking about hijacking Debian packages. In 2 weeks, we have a meetup, and we're talking about OSINT, right? And the person who's running that is James, right?
Yeah, what's his name?
James
McFinney? No.
Yeah, something like that.
It's an Irish last name.
Yeah.
For life, me, I can't remember right now. Anyway, and he's the one who runs the ISC Squared. He's the president of ISC Squared right now, right, for Central Florida. So it should be a pretty sweet talk. Open source intelligence is always a fun topic. I implore you guys to come out to that. I don't think we're not meeting here for that, right?
No, it should be. He said these two are good, but after that we're gonna.
Okay. So the next meeting that we will have it here, and then in the interim, from now till 2 weeks from now, hopefully we will have figured out a new spot to have our meetings.
But if it changes, I'll post it on the Discord.
Yeah, exactly. And if you guys know places when I used to work in Fort Lauderdale, my company would offer their premises for us to come and give talks, and they were fine with it as long as we followed the make sure you badge everybody in and everybody signs in and stuff. So if you guys have ideas or connections, that we're certainly open to doing that and hosting that. The bottom line though is that we don't want to go to a place that we get charged for, because we don't want to charge you guys member dues. We want this to be a free and open source community. And we freely give our time. We're not getting paid for any of this, and we're just trying to build a sweet cybersecurity community here in Central Florida. So I think, do we have any other announcements that you can think of? No? As always, if you have any other questions or anything, feel free to reach out to myself or Ephraim. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to, are there any questions? I guess I should. Yeah, good. I'll turn it over to Andrew for doing some Debian package hacking. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, so today's talk, hijacking Debian packages. So a quick show of hands, who here uses Debian or one of its derivatives? That guy, yeah, okay. Most of you do, because it's the most popular distro, right? And for good reason. It's pretty easy to use, and when it comes to Linux, that itself is an achievement. But hopefully I don't get the Linux distro war stampede coming over me after today. I know people get pretty passionate about their distros. So brief overview of what we're doing. This isn't just about Debian. There are other package systems that have this, I won't say vulnerability, I will call it a weakness. And then we're going to go into what makes a Linux package. Why do we have them? What makes a Debian package a subset of Linux packages? And then we're just going to hijack one. I have set up some AWS instances that you guys can remote into and try to hijack the package. We'll see how that goes, and during that time I'll be wandering around to help you guys out with it, so you can grasp what we're talking about by doing. So, yes, continuation of the disclaimer from before. It is an accomplishment in that they are the most popular distro and that they are by far the easiest to use for your average person, but there is some flaws to their approach. And the weakness that we're talking about today is not new, and it has been a problem with Debian for a very long time now. And I'm not picking on Debian, I'm not trying to single them out, but they have known about it the longest, and they have refused to fix it the longest. So I'm gonna pick on them today. So to better understand what Linux packages are and why they are important, we need to understand what they do and how they do it. Now, the purpose of them is to get software from developers to users. In the Windows world, you download an exe from some random website and install your software. It's a bit different in the Linux world, and that's where packages come in. So they are standardized ways to bundle software. Just like most Windows software comes in EXEs or MSIs, and Linux packages, you might have Debians or RPMs. Those are just the most common. And we're seeing this new breed of like Mac OS style come out where snaps and flat paks are starting to supplant them. They don't have this issue generally because the way they're distributed, but they have their own problems, and maybe in the future we'll take a look into that. But essentially, most Linux packages are just an archive with metadata attached to it. So the package manager can ingest the package and then knows what to do with it, how to turn it into software on your system. Most of these are downloaded from central repositories. They're called repos for short. And every major distro will typically either have their own or they'll pull from upstream. Like Ubuntu, right? They have their own repos, but at the end of the day, they're still pulling them from Debian. So things flow down. All right. So the Debian package format. They have some particular quirks, which I find pretty interesting. It's mostly a byproduct of their age. Has anyone here done C program development? No? Okay. Oh, that one guy. Okay, so I don't know if you've run into this. It's pretty rare. The AR archive format from like the 90s, that is what a Debian package is. It just has a special header that lets you know what its intended use is. Inside of that are two more archives, and they can be in a variety of formats. Older ones are going to use gzip and xzip, and newer ones use zstandard, the same zstandard that Facebook developed. Yeah. Debian is using that now, and that's relevant to us because if we want to inject code into these things, we need a way to extract all these archives and then bundle them back up before anybody can notice. So some knowledge of how to do that quickly is something you want to have. The two archives, you have data and control. Data stores the actual software itself. It is a hierarchy of directories and files that literally gets merged with the root file system in order to install the packages. And then the control is where most of the metadata and other supporting things are stored. What other packages this package depends on, right? helps us escape DLL hell, if any of you know about that. So way back when in the Windows world, you can have a Windows program that needs another Windows program to run, and so on, until you've got like a chain of 20 things that all need each other. The reason why on Windows, you know, the side-by-side SXS folder is so huge is because their solution was just to keep a copy of everything you've ever installed DLL-wise and just shove it in there, and then also put some popular ones in. So the Debian folks saw this and said, well, that's stupid, we're not going to do that. We're just going to make a big repository, everyone puts their packages in it, and we pull as we need. So Debian is literally Debian. No file extension is also present, and it just lists the format version. I think we're currently on 2. And this is a visual diagram. This is using Apache DS. So they're one of the older school people, so they use tar.gzip in theirs currently. And in the control, you have your post installation, pre-removal, and other associated scripts. The function of these is to run at different stages of the package management process. Post-removal is after you've removed it. It's like cleaning itself up. Post-installation, things to do immediately after installation. Like if you install Docker, you're probably gonna want the Docker daemon to run. That's what that's intended use is. And then you can see the file paths. I've provided some examples of what's getting merged with the root file system to get things where they need to be. It is important to note too that all of those scripts get executed as root, because it has to be in order to set the proper permissions or anything else that it's doing. Let's see here. So, knowing how these packages are built, can anybody guess what anybody who hasn't already been told, how it is we're going to hijack these?
Maybe you put some scripts inside of the control part of the package?
Yeah, just like that. If the package is on anywhere we can read and write on the file system, it's vulnerable. And there are some reasons why, namely because Debian refuses to use package signing in the year 2023. I'm gonna bully them a bit more for that later. Now, we can, like Ace was saying, we can extract these packages, put our own scripts in, append and prepend to the scripts. We can even swap out the binaries used for the actual software. And this doesn't work for all Debian packages. You can technically sign a Debian package, it's just not supported. Yeah. But they also have to be obtained off repo. We will get into why, but a surprising amount of software is distributed off repo even today, especially proprietary stuff.
Hey Andrew, was there thinking, I don't want to jump too far into this, was there thinking for not signing packages? Because if you go to a website and you're going to download something off repo, typically they give you a SHA, right? Or a hash that you can verify that your package has not been tampered with in transit or whatever. Was that the idea there, you think?
Yeah, we're going to get into that.
Because, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a control file pulled from Docker Community Edition's package. The stuff in the red box is what we care about here. All sorts of useful information for the package manager are contained here. Dependencies. You can also specify versions, which is very useful if you wanted to say, have a dependency on something you know is vulnerable, like an old version of Apache. You can give yourself a nice backdoor. There's also breaks and replaces. Let's say they have clam AV installed, and we don't like that because it makes our jobs mildly more difficult. We can put it in the breaks and replaces and just remove it. We're already root, but this is a lot less suspicious because nobody pays attention to what APT is doing. And then there's all the other metadata down listed below. this is the stuff that when you do searches with APT, the kind of metadata that is using to help and try and find what you're looking for. Let's see here. And there are plenty of scripts. We just use postinst because it's probably the most common that I've seen, and it's the more reliable ones that we can inject into. And there are two places on a postinst script you can inject. You can do it up top, which is more reliable because as you can see towards the bottom, that exit, if you inject your code below that, the script isn't running anymore. You're just there, not doing anything. But it's also a lot more obvious because if they happen to extract the package and cat the file, they're gonna see you first. It's kind of a marginal benefit, but you take what you can get.
There might also be like, what if part of their script is doing something that you also want to do? And then if you run yours after they've already done the thing, you could throw an error and that could key the user like, hey, something's fishy here, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I've seen this especially in scripts that, so APT does not have a stable CLI interface. Surprise, surprise. And in order to deal with breakage, they will log it somewhere, what it managed to do, and then just suppress all the errors. I've seen that. So sometimes you can get away with it, but you have to be very careful with what you're doing here because APT does have a log. And if you do generate errors, especially if they have, I don't know, like Prometheus set up and running on these things, it might catch you. So Debian repositories, I touched on this a little earlier and mentioned that if they're pulling from a repository, this attack doesn't work, generally. And here's why. So they verify the packages they distribute, but not in the way you might expect. Every repository that is Debian-based has a releases file, which contains a list of all the packages in the repo that they distribute and corresponding MD5 sums. MD5 sums. In the present year. Now, fortunately, that list is signed using public key crypto, so we can't just modify it to sneak by. But the packages themselves are not. If the package checksum does not match what is in the releases file during the time of installation, it aborts and it alerts the user it failed checksum. Not as a security measure, but as an integrity measure, so you don't install corrupted packages. We can't normally modify packages pulled from the repo as a time of check to time of use attack because the file system permissions protect the APT download cache. But if they're not getting it off a repo, it doesn't go in the APT download cache. It goes whatever the working directory is at the time they're fetching it. And we can leverage that. I will see a lot of messed up file system permissions and ACLs, especially on third-party software, because they're very liberal with who can access what, because it just makes the dev's life easier, less chance of things breaking. And we can attack those because we have read and write access to them, and that's the big thing. So wherever, even if the package is at rest on a distribution point, so long as you have read and write, we can very quickly hijack them. Now, if you are using something like RPM, the expectation is that you sign your packages, even if you're distributing them off repo. You generate a signing key and sign the file with your private key and distribute your public key so that they can verify what you wrote is what you are about to install and run. This screenshot is an attempt to install Kubernetes bench, and I've injected some code into it via a similar method. And it fails signature validation because it's not signed anymore. The signature is no longer valid once you've modified it. It aborts, it tells you why, and that's a pretty big red flag. It is notable that APT does not do this out of the box. Now, I mentioned earlier on in floor talk, yes, Metasploit modules. I wrote ones that you guys can try this thing out. And it was also a test to see if it could be effectively weaponized. And it turns out that yes, you definitely can. The biggest obstacle is just writing the Metasploit module. It is awful. Nothing's documented, and I figured out halfway through that the session type, despite the fact that Metasploit will automatically upgrade a shell to interpreter, you can't mix and match what you're pulling or your script just won't work. If you guys try to hack on the Metasploit modules that I'm going to give to you today, keep that in mind. And we made a real-time demo just in case, for whatever reason, you guys can't access the lab environment. Let's see if I can get it to play. Okay, so we start out as an unprivileged user. They are not in the sudoish file. They cannot elevate themselves.
And they've been reported.
And they've been reported. Oh no. And we have a piece of software that we can tell from the logs it's running about every 5 minutes doing something. And if we cat the logs, we can see that it's downloading some packages and updating the system. Well, that's pretty interesting. And it looks like it's also using this as its work directory. Now that package, we plug the path into it, into the Metasploit module. We already have SSH, we just don't have privileged access to the box. We can use that to inject a command that randomly creates a username and password and gives them sudo access. And let's wait for it. We can use those credentials to log in. It's not. Oh, there it goes. All right, and what we're doing here is the su command, which switches the user.
I can't see from here. Is the username like a random string?
Yeah, I just randomly generated it. There is another version of this, which is just a bare Ruby script you can run locally that watches directories and then injects whatever arbitrary command. So that would be more useful for like remote, where you don't necessarily have consistent access to the system. And that's why I chose this method versus something like a reverse shell. And there you go, we got rid. So easy peasy, so long as the script works. And this also took quite a bit of time to set up. There was a lot of failure along the way, but I've tested it enough times, I think we're gonna be good. But something else worth pointing out is that this whole thing didn't even have to exist. This issue, I said it has been around a long time. They've known about this for 22 years. In fact, they had a very long discussion on the Debian mailing list about how it's not a security issue now, but it's going to be. So,
I think it was not going to be a security issue back then because MD5 was still considered secure.
Yes, MD5 had not yet been brute forced by the EFF. Okay, so some enterprising hacker said, okay, I'm going to fix that, and he implemented per package signatures natively into DPKG, just like RPM does it. And Jason Gunthorpe at the time was pretty high up in the Debian community, and he didn't like that. He advocated that it should at least have an off switch if I don't want to use it. He thought public key crypto was stupid when you could just MD5 sum everything. So not only did he push for it to be disabled by default, but just the amount of vitriol that he spewed, and I put a link to the mailing list, that he spewed in that discussion killed it off entirely. Yeah, never even got merged. So thank you, Jason. You've made my job a little easier today. And in the present, where we're at, we have two competing package signature formats in the Debian, DPKG SIG, and then a standalone one. It's the same one Apache uses, but neither are officially supported. If you make a signed package and you upload it to the Debian repositories, they will strip it from the package before they distribute it. So even if you're being proactive, they'll set you back 2 steps. It's really boneheaded, and it's one of those things where sometimes people are wrong. So, as you, I don't know what jobs you all work, but sometimes you have to consider that even if it's not the most comfortable solution, sometimes it is necessary. Or you're gonna end up like Debian now, where they're getting their lunch ate because they failed to adapt. Flatpaks are the future, sorry, but that's how it is. So a quick thank you specifically to Radio from CitrusSec. He helped me navigate Metasploit quite a bit. SolarGraph turns out to be a really useful tool when you're working with Ruby. Now for the Live Lab component. The QR code is just a link to a GitLab repo where you can download the module. You're going to put that into exploits Linux file format if you're at all familiar with Metasploit. And then you're going to have to reboot. You could try doing reload all and get it to reload the paths, but it's been a little inconsistent for me. And then for each of these targets, they are on Amazon AWS. The username and passwords listed above. And that is your unprivileged user. So find the software that is insecurely updating itself and hijack it. Use the scripts that are in that GitLab repo. And I'm gonna walk around the floor, help you guys out any way that you need it. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And I'll leave this slide up so you can access those URLs. Okay, any questions in the interim?
So do you use Archlight?
No.
That sounded a joke.
I do. Dude, love these marks.
Yeah, I was hoping somebody was reading those.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say you would have known when you asked what if anybody.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because they'll tell you.
I should have asked that. I was like, okay, all of you put your hands down. No, typically I use Red Hat or Fedora just because that's what I use at work. Yeah.
I got a question. So you mentioned that Debian is like the most popular. Is Debian the most popular among like non-enterprise? I can't imagine that Red Hat is not more popular than Debian.
Yeah. So in enterprise environments, Red Hat, SUSE, Ubuntu.
Right. That makes sense. Because I can't imagine an enterprise is just gonna like, oh, we're gonna go with Debian that doesn't have any support at all, and I can't pay for some person that I can call on the phone that can do some crazy stuff. And you know what I mean? I just like, it seems wild, but yeah.
Yeah, you'll see that they'll sometimes use Debian in smaller shops, especially ones that don't have really well-defined rules, which are more prone to making mistakes that you can leverage, like this one. But this attack does work if you're adjacent on the network to a user on their home network. If one of you guys gets through this lab, I'm going to spin up a VM on a bridge, and then I'll just go start downloading random Debian packages and see if they can inject it by the time I install any of them. So it's not just servers that you can use this on. Cool. All right.